I'll try to get you answers. It This is probably called, stump the chump, and I'm the chump. So questions that we haven't thought of that you have, we appreciate because that means other people have them. And as we generate answers, we will get them out to everyone so that they can have the benefit of your concerns, questions, and we'll be able to answer them. Hopefully, yeah, well, it's not, David, it's not very hard to stump this jump. But to the extent that we can answer the questions here, we will. And some of those, as Jamie suggested, may point to campus processes. So with that, and I note that Daryl Maeda has joined from Boulder. And Daryl, thank you for joining. Rod Nairn was hopefully going to be able to join for some time from Anschutz. Not sure who else, but hi, Jesse. Welcome from the Springs.
And Kelly
And
Klebe
that,
is here.
Jamie,
Provost
it's
Klebe.
yours. Go ahead.
Provost Klebe is here as well.
I don't. Oh, there. Yes, thank you. Hi, Kelly. Welcome. Thank you for being here. So, probably to start off, Jamie, before you start fielding questions, is the selection committee at the system level consists of Daryl Maeda for Boulder, Kelly Klebe for Colorado Springs, Rod Nairn for Anschutz, and Constancio Nakuma from Denver. So that's after they've gotten off of the campuses. Then they come to the system, proposals would come to the system level, and that group of four is the group making final decisions. So that you have them here is great, and you'll get a sense of what their view of things happens to be and their thinking as appropriate. But I don't want to put any of them on the spot except as they may be able to help us with the campus process. Jamie, all yours. Muted.
So attendees, all yours. Free game. You can go ahead and hop in verbally. You're welcome to put something in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat, so whatever you're most comfortable with.
Go first. My name's Maureen Stabio. I'm at the Anschutz campus. I teach in the medical school, and we now have a medical branch at Fort Collins. And I'm wondering if this is eligible, a program supporting medical education, the two branch campuses is eligible, or is this designed to support undergraduate education?
So it is not limited to undergraduate education. So it's faculty focused depending upon what the faculty wants to be working on, the individual faculty. At least in all of our discussions, there has been no concern about branch campuses. And that would include, and Daryl, I'm going to look to you in a moment, but that would include, for example, the branch campus work that's going on between Boulder Engineering and Western and Mesa, and perhaps might include, I have no idea of its status at this point, the relationship between Anschutz Nursing and Fort Lewis. Daryl, anything you want to add to that?
No, I hadn't even considered these branch campuses, but I think that we could certainly have a super quick conversation and settle that question for good. My inclination would be to say, as long as we're seeing collaboration, that's the main thing that we're after. Is that kind of your sense, Mike?
Agreed. Thank you.
I mean, the other possibility, because we do work with undergraduate campuses as well, like the Boulder campus and the undergraduate program, is to do both medical and undergraduate education. But would you rather just have like one group that we're focused on?
I would rather have what you're interested in. Right. So I'm really interested in what the faculty want to push and where they feel they can use this support.
I I guess a follow-up question to that is, in the application, it talks about testing this within a course. So I'm assuming it could be testing among multiple courses. There any more guidelines on that?
So the intent of the testing is to be able to come up with a reasonable first pass assessment of the effectiveness of the innovation. That's its goal. In most cases, so this is me being limiting in my thinking. So just saying that. In most cases, the natural response would be, well, I'm teaching XYZ and we want to do the following, and we're going to do it these 3 semesters, or we're going to do it 3 times, whatever it might be. If it's something that is of larger impact, then I think that there needs to be further discussion in the proposal of why this is not being able to be supported institutionally. Right? So the larger the impact, the more important it is to the institution. The institution ought to be able to be supporting it, as opposed to individual faculty who are pushing innovations where they may not have resources to support their work because of the scope more than anything else.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. David?
As a sort of follow-up to that question, if you've got one class that you're submitting a proposal for, but you're collaborating with faculty on multiple campuses, they may not have that exact same class. So you're going to be necessarily involving more than one class. There may be a principal class that would then have connections to other classes, and that would be okay in the format that you're seeing here?
Yes, and the example that I use, ignore as you will, is if somebody wanted to look at adaptive learning and they wanted to do adaptive learning in American history on the Boulder campus with vendor X, okay, and that constellation has a bunch of characteristics, they may be able to partner with somebody on, my eyes just fell to Jesse Saw on the Colorado Springs campus, who wants to do adaptive learning in biology. So how would you two work together to assess either differences in tools? I don't want to invent what you would work together to do. That's I think up to you, but that would be a difference where it's dramatic, right? It would be biology on one campus and American history on another, but you could still put together an effective proposal. So, short answer is yes.
And just to kind of follow up with that, would you see one of those classes being, say, the principal class? Could that work, or do they have to equally be represented?
So great question. The way that we have this set up is that the PI has to be on one campus, right? So there's the PI campus, and then there's the collaborators campus. Both campuses have a budget. Both campuses have to be, reviewed and approved for their, participation, if you will, in doing this work. But there is a lead campus, and so. That doesn't limit the amount of money that can be associated with it. It's just that we have to have somebody who's going to be on point.
And I promise this is the last one I'll ask. And so it then is there's a 3-year period, and one of let's say the PI has to be involved in all 3 years, but the other collaborators do not, or do they have to? Everybody has to be involved every semester of all 3 years.
So one of the things that we recognized was the challenge of collaboration. And we did not want to put out a strict set of rules about the kind of thing that you just asked. What we want is a meaningful collaboration, but it's the PI that has to take the responsibility for how we're going to report this out and so forth. So I would say to your question, yes, it can be flexible in the way you described, but it wants to be it wants to be a collaboration that adds value, not just that checks a box.
Right. No checking
Yes.
boxes. Yep. Great. Thank you.
Reading the chat. This is from Kimbra.
Yeah.
Add more to that, please.
Yeah, I can clarify that. I'm wondering if, you're talking about assessments of different mechanisms, different technologies that we're developing to expand our classes. Would those have to be integrated into classes on all the participating campuses? Or is it possible for a class developed for use on one campus to work with collaborators on another campus to help develop the technology, for example?
Let me play back and see if I understand. So I have invented a technology called, you can't see it, sorry, called a fountain pen. And, we're using this in my class, and this is working great, but we're having supply chain problems in getting ink. And so we've invented something else. We're asking a collaborator to work with us to help with that technology. And that technology may be improved by the collaborator by inventing a pencil where we don't have a supply chain limitation or something. I'm not trying to be silly, but just, is that what you're talking about?
I'm just wondering whether both collaborating campuses have to offer courses that are being assessed for the same innovation, or whether they can work together to develop the innovation, but it's only being tested for courses on one of the participating campuses.
That's a good question. I will give you a variant answer, not to your question. And just to let you know, since Daryl, you're the one who's on camera, I'll ask you your thoughts in a moment. And then if Kelly wants to jump in, that would be great. So I could imagine that two classes are have very, very similar syllabi on two campuses, right? So I'm imagining that. And because of the number of classes that can be offered, the ability to have a real assessment where you have a standard that you're judging against is not possible. So you're teaching the class and you're doing it this way, and there are no other, classes to be used as the baseline. But the other campus may be able to provide the baseline because the syllabi are so similar, right? That would be a way of the two working together, but both of them would be doing assessments in that case in some way. So it's not an exact answer to your question. Daryl, do you have any insights you'd like to provide?
Well, I have some thoughts, but Provost Klebe just came on camera, so I want to pass the on to her.
Could have gone on, Daryl. So, Mike, I was thinking about what if in a similar kind of alternative scenario is I'm tired of using my rock stone down here and carving things in it. So I want your pen that you've developed. So can the collaboration be you're not about your class, but you're helping me to implement a new technology because you're the creator of it and you've used it. But the assessment will then just be, how does this work in my class? So I know, because we've talked about lots of different ways to do that collaboration, right? Whether we're both offering in our provost meetings, are we both offering the classes? Is someone providing expertise about that? Will we allow all of those types of ways to really invent something kind of new, reapply it? Now it's going to be in my psychology class rather than your engineering class. I'm using a pen now, but right. So we'll stay with your silly example, but it's just whatever it is of that technology. So there's a variety. I mean, I see a variety of ways of people possibly doing that collaboration. And as long as the collaboration is real, like you mentioned earlier, and then there's assessment on what that means, on the value of it, it seems like we might have been okay.
Thank you. So I won't answer that, Kelly. It's a great example. Let's go to Daryl and then see if we can circle around.
Yeah, I do think it's a really good question. One of the primary goals of this grant is to really foster robust collaboration between campuses. So I guess one way that I would approach this question is to think about the robustness of the collaboration. Working together on developing a technology is one sort of collaboration, working together to develop a technology, and then implementing it and assessing it might be considered to be another level of collaboration. So I don't think that the grant itself as it's written spells out any particular threshold of collaboration, but in terms of for me at least, when it would come to time to look at proposals, I would really want to test the question of how deep and how extensive is the collaboration being proposed here, and how deep is the learning that we're going to be able to extract from this collaboration going to be.
And it's important. Well, so this is me. You just heard two people who are on the evaluation committee. I'm not on the evaluation committee. But it's really important to honor where faculty are on the different campuses. And I think that if you have, so for example, School of Dentistry has a lot going on in VR and AR supporting clinical education. And if another campus says, we want to do the same thing, no one on our campus knows how to do this, can we partner with dentistry so that we take advantage of their expertise, which I think is the focus of your question. Not speaking for the two evaluators on the screen, it seems to me that that's a way to really support cross-campus work. And again, sticking with the example, dentistry already knows it works. They're already doing assessing. They've got expertise, and they're helping another campus. And so in a different discipline, obviously, not dentistry. And we will all learn if that, is able to have a good impact. So I would be leaning in a positive way to that being a generative collaboration between the campuses. But Daryl, Kelly, do you want to add any more to that? Okay. And there, sorry, people came on and off camera. I lost your picture. Is that okay for you now? Thank you. More questions? I can't see everyone, but if you put your hand up, you'll go to a place on the screen where I can see you. That is your electronic hand.
More questions. I'm like David here, popping out lots of questions. Can a collaborator serve on more than one proposal? Like, for example, if I wanted to collaborate with the library, but they're already on somebody else's grant, or with a biostats core or a VR lab or a 3D printing lab, is that okay?
So the short answer is it depends.
Okay.
Right. So the shorter answer is, yeah, it's fine. The "it's depends" is because it has to be okayed by the campus that that individual is on, and if they become overcommitted
Yeah.
beyond their regular work, the campus may go, sorry, you just don't have enough time to do this for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And then my other question is, the students impacted, should they be, you know, students enrolled in a CU program, or can students in a CU outreach program, which we do a lot of at, particularly at the Anschutz campus, benefit?
So again, I'll
Is
turn
that-
it over to
maybe
my
that's back to the larger the impact.
Well, no, it's so again, I'm not judging. I will give you my response and tell you why it's my response, and then ask Daryl and Kelly for theirs. I think more refined thoughts on it. This is supposed to be looking at supporting our students in our courses where we have learning outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So the first answer is, outreach doesn't seem to be an appropriate venue for this. That's my frame and why I framed it that way, but I'll turn it to Daryl and Kelly.
I think it's a really good question. I do think about our drive to use technology to enhance student success being really about outcomes for our students, right? Our currently enrolled students, for the most part, right? Our degree seeking students, although, I think that's we could be a little bit squishier on that, but that's just my initial thought. I also think that, it could be the case that you could make a really good argument for why an outreach program would matter. But I think the most obvious application would be to degree seeking students.
Kelly, do you want to add any?
If it's for degree seeking students, but it spills over into outreach, that will not hurt, I imagine. But the goal is clearly our students, which I agree with.
Okay, great. Okay. Others? Oh, sorry, here's one in the chat. So I would first say no, right, to the question in the chat. That's my initial response. And a framing for that response is, even with courses that we teach, we might be able to identify a more effective person to teach it than somebody that we have in our particular department. So let's just use this money, hire them, and bring them in and have them teach it for a semester or two, right? As opposed to what are we doing that's going to be sustainable if it has impact, right? So we're looking at efficiency and efficacy relative to the learning outcomes and goals of the course. And we want to say, how are we improving that? And we want to assess it. So, let's say that Daryl and I are in the same department or even in adjacent departments, and people go, Daryl would do a much better job than Mike. Let's bring him in for a semester or two to teach it. Let's evaluate it. And by gosh, he does do a better job. Yeah, well, that's not really in the spirit of providing something sustainable unless, I take a different position and Daryl moves into doing that full time. But thank you for that question. Lori.
Hi, thank you. And forgive me if this question was asked during the last information session and I just can't remember the answer. Okay, so I'm interested in how innovation will be measured in terms of the proposals, and perhaps, what counts as innovation and what doesn't count as innovation. Are there certain expectations in terms of invention and development say, versus creative, innovative use of already existing technologies on campus, per se?
So thank you for the question, and it's really important to try to lay out expectations. My expectation, and again, we'll turn to Daryl and Kelly in a couple of minutes, is that this is not about technology development. You don't have to be a technologist and so forth. This is about using tools that are out there that may not be used in your discipline, may be used, as we had in the discussion before with Kimbra, on another campus, but not used on your campus, for reasons that are resource-based, may be available in some pockets on your campus, but aren't available for the work that you want to do. Right, so there's a lot of reasons why you might not be able to access a particular pedagogical innovation, technology, and so forth, and this grant allows you to access that. That's really the key. It's not about inventing new technologies.
Yeah, I might add I think I'm agreeing with you here, Mike, but innovation doesn't mean that it's never been done on the face of planet Earth, right? Mm-hmm. Innovation means you're going to do something differently to impact your students in different ways.
Yep, great. So I'm looking at the chat, and then I have Allison, so that's just the way my eyeball went. Allison, if you can pause for a second. So unfortunately, I don't think we have anyone from Denver to reply to what the Denver vetting process is going to be. Lori, I see you there.
But Mike, to answer one of the questions in the chat, we don't have a limit that needs to come from each campus.
Right. We don't have a limit, but there is a vetting process to say, you know, as we had use of multiple use of resources of the same resource might lead to a limitation. Yeah. So I'm going to jump to Allison and then go to Monica and then go back to the chat, and we'll see where we are then. So Allison?
Thanks, Michael. So it seems like a lot of the discussion is around, as you said, not necessarily developing technology, but sort of using it, accessing it. So tools that are sort of, either technology or some kind of pedagogical aid. I'm wondering if innovation extends beyond that to sort of ideas about new skills that have not been taught in your field, innovative aspects of skill development, that kind of thing. So sort of thinking more conceptually as opposed to technologically.
So there's the original intent. So back at t = 0, and this came from Mark Kennedy when he was still here. It was looking at technological tools that we could then scale up. How can we scale up? How can we help expand this? But conceptual tools in a discipline, learning in a different way in a discipline, providing skills that weren't available before in a discipline, also scale up, right? There's no concern with that. For me, the independent of my personal interest in various technologies, the key question is how are you proposing to impact the efficiency and efficacy of student learning relative to the proposed outcomes and goals of the course? That's the key piece. Daryl, you're nodding. Do you want to add anything else? Okay. And does that help, Allison?
I think it does, yeah. So it sounds like it is sort of a broader scope.
Yep.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Thank you. Monica?
Yes. So since the learning outcomes and the assessment is such a vital part of this for the awardees and the work moving forward, would you say it's imperative to have an educational researcher on board that's really familiar with studying the learning outcomes and how?
So, two answers, right? It's always valuable to have input from our colleagues who are experts in this area, right? So, that's always a good thing. However, the learning goals and outcomes and so forth for a course are what we as individual faculty and departments have to evaluate relative to accreditation criteria, right? And we don't bring in our educational colleagues with specialties in this area to do all of this work for us as part of accreditation. So I don't want to make it that heavy a burden, but if it's something that works naturally for you and then great. And frankly, we're not putting any in on this, right? If you have a class of 15 or if your class have 150, right, one can argue about the statistical validity of what's going on and yada 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 forever, but you still have to assess the class, you still have to look at the goals, the outcomes. So that's important, but it's in the context of what you would be doing anyway as you look at various accreditation requirements. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Daryl, Kelly, anything to add?
I think you said that perfectly.
Okay, great.
I would
Thank you.
agree with that. Yep.
Then back to the chat from Maureen. Can you tell us more about the letters of campus commitment? Does this need to be signed by a dean, department chair, yada, yada, yada? And the short answer is it will depend on the campus. So the process of final signing for the letters of commitment will depend on how the campus process works. And I'll look to both Daryl and Kelly, but I'll say where I would start, right? For you to be thinking about these letters of commitment, what is it that the campus is, or what is it, yeah, let's just say the campus. What is the campus committing to? Right, so if the campus is committing to you as a faculty member teaching 3 courses in a row where normally you would cycle out, before then at minimum you need a chair. If this is got some resource implications in a school or college, you might need a chair and a dean. If there's buyout, then at minimum you're going to need a chair to say, well, yeah, we can afford to have this person buy out. And then an overall review may be done at a campus level, which would lead to somebody at campus level signing off. But at minimum, you should think about the what you are asking the campus to commit to, and who has to give a thumbs up to that. So Daryl and then Kelly with thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the point here is that the evaluators need to know that whatever resources you're claiming are going to support your project have been approved by whoever needs to approve them.
Yeah, I would agree the same, right? Part of UCCS's vetting process will have whether or not those commitments are there, right? And have a letter that just goes up and says everything's here and it can go out, but that they got the letter. So, even if you're putting software on all the labs, you need your IT people to say, yeah, we're going to put the software on the labs. So Daryl and Mike said it great. Think about your commitment and who's going to promise that, who you asking to promise that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And like I see that physical space is not eligible. So a commitment that, I can use this space this summer or something.
If that's what you need,
Yeah.
then you need commitment that you can do that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And trivial examples, right? So here's a trivial example. Somebody wants to do VR, so they need headsets. and they've asked for money to buy them. Cool, great, wonderful. All right, who's going to store them? How are they going to be accessed by the students? Is there any hygiene that's required? Do we need to clean it? Who's going to be responsible for cleaning it, et cetera, et cetera. So, just how is it going to operate? Who's going to do it? And if you say it's someone else, then someone else has to say, yeah, I agree.
That letter is different than, you don't need letters.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
You just need to have a collaboration plan, but you don't need letters from all the collaborators.
You need to have the collaborators agree that they're going to be collaborating.
Would that go in page 4, collaboration plan?
I'll look to Jamie, who's
Or like if I have a collaborator write a letter of support, that's different than the campus commitment.
right. So the collaborator needs a letter of commitment from their campus saying that whatever they're saying they're going to do, they've got agreement. Right? Yeah. Okay. Great. More questions? Lori. Oh, and then David, if he's still here, I saw his hand up from a while ago. Lori?
Could you speak more into the motivation behind the cross-campus collaboration? Like what is really, I'm interested in what's really driving that cross-campus collaboration. Is it because you're trying to motivate more collaboration across campuses? Is it because the more, the wider, like the assessment methods might be more reliable across 2 campuses? I mean, what exactly is your motivation there?
Okay, so I'll be upfront about all of this, and then we can say why it is a good or a bad thing. So it started as a parallel to what's called AB Nexus, so Anschutz Boulder Nexus, where it was bringing collaborators from the Boulder campus and the Anschutz campus together, providing seed funding with the goal of being able to generate proposals that would bring in more funding, one, and generate collaborations that might not have been there in the first place, two. Right, and there was a good deal of money put into that by the 2 campus chancellors and by the president, and that was Kennedy at the time. And so when this came up, Kennedy said, well, I would like to be able to see how we can take successful innovations and propagate them across the campuses. Because the campuses are, forget about your department silos, and your specialty silos. We've got campus silos. So the question was, how can we do that? How can we help propagate across the campuses? And this was a suggested mechanism to, if you will, force communication among faculty across campuses to identify these potential synergies and generate a proposal that had enough communication over a long enough period of time that you could really impact both campuses. But I don't know if we want to say any more than that. But Daryl, Kelly, that's my version of history, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, there we go. Dave had to leave. So there's Kimber again. So the answer is yes. But I would say for me, and I would really invite Daryl and Kelly to comment on this, for me, the key goal is to be able to support faculty exploration. It's just the call, right? to support faculty exploration to increase efficacy and efficiency of student learning relative to the course learning goals and outcomes. That's what this is about, in my view. But Daryl.
Well, I'm curious, Kelly's thoughts here.
Oh, there she is. Sorry, Kelly, I couldn't see your face. So.
Okay. No, I would agree. It's really about the innovation and impacting student learning. But we do have these other things that require collaboration, and the collaboration, I think Daryl used these terms earlier, as it needs to be robust. And so your funding may need, right, especially Kimbra, you're in the Colorado Springs, if you're working with Boulder, you may need some gas money, you may need some way to get up there, you may need some way to get down here, or you're going to interact like this. You may not need that money, but you may need some ways to get that to happen in robust ways. So I don't know if, I don't think I thought about this as X points based on how your money is spent and where you're putting your money. It's kind of the overall project, and does it impact student learning? Is there collaboration, and are you assessing that student learning? And I'm not even sure I'm evaluating, necessarily, is it likely to work? It could be, is it a good risk-taking thing that we'd want to explore whether this even works or not? So you have to have some grounds for why you're doing what you're doing, because you have to show that it impacts, you think it's going to impact student learning. But it may fail in this trial. I'm okay with you taking a risk as long as you have a good strategy, but others may disagree.
No, I was just going to add that, I think that you can think about this as a faculty development grant as well, right? Faculty development in the area of student success through technology, through collaboration, through innovation.
And a bunch of things popped up in the chat. Kelly, I think triggered by your comment about needing gas money. The not funding travel was essentially meant, and again, I think Daryl and Kelly, I really need your help on this, but was it initially brought up as, oh, no, we're not going to pay you to go to this conference, that conference, another conference, to hear a bunch of things, come back, try it for a semester, and so forth. But if it's like, we're going to bring our group together and, we want gas money to go from here to there and have lunch together, or whatever it might be, that's what I think is viewed as basically normal. It's taking the money and really using it, abusing it, if you will, for, I would love to go to Trieste and talk to some colleagues there at a NATO conference about one thing or another. No, that's not meant to be supported by this particular work. And in terms of space, it's not renovating space, right? So that would be a campus kind of thing to help provide the space in the way that it was needed. Essentially viewed as being temporary modifications that are needed to accomplish some goal. And
Michael, could you say that again? So if you need to renovate an existing space to make it work for this novel thing you're doing, that would be a campus commitment, not a budget in the grant.
That's the way I would look at it, but I think that there are a lot of there's a lot of gray area there, right? And so I'll give you, some gray area. I need to be able to have blackout curtains on a whole bunch of windows in a given room in order to be able to use whatever it is I'm trying to use. And as long as the campus okays it, I'm okay with the grant having the blackout curtains in there, but the campus has to be able to tell you, yeah, but you need to be able to lift them up so every other class can have some sunlight. That's the kind of thing, as opposed to I need to do construction, right? I need to build temporary walls, et cetera, where that would be, if the campus said they wanted to do it, that's their business, but we would not want to be able to spend money building temporary walls to create a particular environment. Daryl, Kelly, anything to add to that? Okay. You know, Luxembourg's nice, but, you know, probably not my first choice.
You said that Michael, that the project does not have to have a commercial or impact or a patent but if it does, is there an opportunity to share that? Or is that thing that would perhaps go within the future impact section?
So, you've just crossed over into very complex territory.
Yeah, because this gets into like tech transfer and innovations and all, so should we just leave that out of this?
You know, there are things that could happen as part of the project, but, you know, we're really not looking at creating new technologies, right? So it's not really a research project, it's application or development. This exists and we want to test it out in this setting. So.
Thank you, Jamie. You can see I have a lot of questions, and this is a new territory for Anschutz.
I'm back channeling you a few other things, Maureen, right now.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jamie. And all questions are great. Really appreciate it, Maureen. More questions. I see we're down to one page of pictures on my screen, so I can probably just see hands waving.
I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
If we're worried that one department may not support one person teaching the same class 3 semesters in a row, is there a problem with having other members of the team swap out in that sense?
So I think that the biggest question is how are you going to maintain required consistency for the overall assessment? Right. And so that's a question of what's the innovation? Is this a team that's going to be doing the work all the time anyway? Are they going to participate and either team teach or, you know, be in the class for one semester, even if they're not teaching it, and then teach it another semester? So how can you build as consistent a set of applications of this innovation as possible, so what you're assessing is really not impacted by faculty differences, if that makes any sense.
Sounds like that's something that we'd have to build that into part of our plan in the grant.
Yep, you'd have to argue for that. Not forbidden outright, but the goal is to be able to, you know, assess something that is consistently applied. Daryl, Kelly, anything to add to that?
Well, one way to control for instructor would be if you have pre-existing assessments, right? And you can show that here's the consistent delta between instructor A and instructor B, or maybe, you know, the delta is 0. So we know that over time, historically over time, these two professors have taught at with similar success. So I do think there's ways to think about it, but it would be, as Mike said, really important to control for the instructor.
Kelly?
So just to bring up, so that's the talking about internal validity of whether we know our impact was effective. But you also in assessment want to know if it's generalizable across different instructors, external validity. So, you know, I think it's how you talk about your assessment plan, right? And are there other controls in there, like Daryl mentioned? And then that may be a bonus in your part as well as practical. of the assessment plan. So it's kind of, like good research, how to do that, but a good assessment, a good evaluation plan tries to rule out alternative explanations and see if it really will work in a real world setting where instructors change from one semester to the next, but maybe not some of that technology you would use because you might require that in your discipline. So I'm more open, but I would read the assessment plan carefully to see if some of those controls are in there, such as what Daryl mentioned.
And Laurel has a question in the chat, and the diffusion of innovation among participating classes, no, that's not a requirement. And really the baseline, right? So not what you might put on there as icing and so forth, but the base is, what are the learning outcomes, learning goals of the class? What are those? And are you being more efficacious or more efficient in meeting those by the innovation that you're proposing? So that's absolutely the key piece, is focusing on the student outcomes in the course. Now, if you have retention, belonging, if you have a bunch of that as part of your goals for the course, then absolutely, right? But it's the stated goals of the course.
Thank you.
Filigree is great on top of that, right? Because there's a lot of possibilities, right? So I don't want to limit it, but that base needs to be there.
Thank you.
And let me add one more thing, because we did talk about it. So I'm in engineering, and we have a bunch of labs, and you might imagine, oh, well, my innovation is in a lab class, and I'm going to add this new thingy to the lab. So we're going to buy a bunch of thingies, and we're going to use it in my course. But that lab is used by a bunch of different courses, right? So that's a way that you can get this diffusion, but it's not necessarily by design, right? It's your class, you're doing it, but it is an added benefit that other faculty and students can see it and ask questions and just be curious, right? All right, so Kimbra has some interesting comments there, so that's great. Thank you, Kimbra. Okay, so other questions? Hi, Catherine. You're on mute, sorry.
David isn't here. I want to make sure that I think you've answered this question, but I want to report back to him and see if this has been answered. He's written, could the collaboration involve, I think you've already answered this, Mike, involve staff such as specialists in course design, especially if those staff members have terminal degrees in their field and have previously worked as faculty in higher ed. I think the idea that what he was asking about is to do one slight technological advance to things that are already there, but that the faculty might not know how to do, and then have that be part of the grant, and then do the courses. We wouldn't need that reinvented again. Is that something that could work, Mike?
If I understand it correctly, I would say yes. So first it can work in collaboration, and I think we talked about how you can have people who are expert in particular technologies on one campus supporting faculty on another campus. That seems to be a good way to collaborate. Certainly if you look at the variety of supports that are available for an individual to use, the expertise does not necessarily exist just among the faculty. We have, tremendous staff expertise. Maureen, you were talking about cores and so forth, right? So we have, experts on the Anschutz campus in the various cores, and they can be part of the team that actually pulls this together. So there's no problem with that as I see it. Again, I want to defer to Kelly and Daryl to say if they have more to add to that. Kelly?
Yeah, I would be looking at the team and what is being proposed and how it can all work. So it's not what their job type, what their classification is of person.
Daryl?
Yeah, I just agree with that 100%.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so
Okay.
much.
And Jamie will do what? You'll put a link on our webpage to the recording?
Yeah, or I'll embed it directly. It will be there. It will be posted on Friday by the afternoon on Friday.
Great. Thank you so much. With that, because various people have back-to-back Zoom meetings, a 2-minute bio break I plan to give you unless you have a question. Any last questions? Thank you all so much for being here, for your engagement, for your questions. I think it helps everyone and helps us too. So thank you. Good afternoon. Bye all.